So the other day I was trying to clean my friend's SNES system, and unfortunately while trying to test it after I finished cleaning it, I broke the power jack. So I figured today on Shquaredup I would show you guys how to repair an SNES system and open it up and clean it while you're at it. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I'm Sean and this is Shquaredup. So to replace this power jack, we are going to need a few things. All the things that I'm going to use today are under a $50 budget for everything. So let's start off with the first thing you'll need. We are repairing a power jack today. So you are going to need a replacement power jack. I got this one off of eBay. I believe I got two of them for about $10 or $12. It took about two or 3 weeks to get to me. So it's not that bad. You guys can pick a couple of these up if you need it. The next thing you will need is some flux. This is to clean off the area that you're going to be soldering, to make sure your contacts are clean and spot on, to make sure the solder actually sticks onto it very, very well. This is going to involve some soldering. So you are going to need a soldering gun, or a soldering iron as it's known. I'll leave a description in the link for the one I'm using personally and a couple of others I found. You can find these as cheap as $15 off of Amazon. They won't be the best, but honestly, they'll get the job done. Just be very careful with it. It does get very hot. It goes up to like 500-600 degrees. You don't want to burn your hands. Be very, very cautious with it. With that being said, you're going to need some solder itself. You can find these pretty cheap as well. They're all over the place. Your local hardware store should have them. You're going to need a little bit of soldering wick. This is soldering wick, and this is used to remove the old solder that's holding the broken part in place. So you're going to need this to remove the solder, to remove the broken part so you can replace it. You're also going to need a electrical toolkit. I'll leave a link in the description below for where I got my toolkit so you guys can pick one up as well. This was fairly cheap and it has more tools than I'll ever need. It's not the best quality in the world, but it'll get the job done for this repair. Next thing you'll need is a toothbrush to help you clean things off and some isopropyl alcohol. I'm using the 1-Up fluid, which is 99% isopropyl alcohol. If you don't have a toothbrush laying around, you could also use the good old Q-tips. They work just as well. You just have to be a little bit more, it might take you a little bit more time with the Q-tip though. In my toolkit here, I have a 4.5 Nintendo security game bit. You're gonna need this to open up the 6 main screws on the bottom of the SNES system. And you will also need a regular Phillips head screwdriver. And it's always a good idea to have a pair of electrical tweezers as well, just to grab those little spots and, you know, maneuver them whichever way you like. Regular tweezers will work, but the electrical ones, like this needle point here, I find does a much better job than regular tweezers. Here's our next tip. Before removing any screws, remember to have a place to keep them. I am personally using this blue mat, which has a organizer where I can leave my screws as I do this repair. The first thing we need to do is flip this Super Nintendo over and use our 4.5mm game bit to unscrew these 6 screws here. Once you've gotten those 6 screws out, you can flip the machine back over and take off the top shell. At this point, you should probably turn your power button on and off even though the machine is not plugged in, just to cycle off any extra voltage inside the machine to make sure you guys don't blow any fuses, and this machine will need a lot more repairs. Before taking out the eject button, take a note of how it's put in, as putting it back is going to be very tricky. Take a photo if you need to. Once you've removed the eject button, it is time to take out the controller port. The controller port is attached by this white ribbon wire. Make sure to take it out very gently as you do not want to damage it. you can now unscrew the power button and remove it very, very carefully. Follow the wires attached onto the power button all the way here. Make sure to take that connection out very, very slowly. Next step is to remove the top half of the heat shield. That is held in place by these screws here. Now it's time to remove the cartridge slot. Be sure to remove this part very carefully as it is on there pretty tight, and this is the part of the machine that reads your cartridge games. If your system has a soundboard, now would be a good time to take that out as well. It's connected with these two screws here. Once you've removed them, you can just pop it off. If your system does not have a soundboard, don't worry, that's normal too. It just means that your system is a little bit newer and you can skip this step. Next, it's time to unscrew the power jack. The power jack screws are located here and here. At this point, you can gently take out the motherboard from the bottom shell. There shouldn't be too much of a resistance. If there is, just double check that there's no extra screws that you forgot. And the last screw to remove is this silver one on the bottom. At this point, you can turn on your soldering iron. I personally use temperatures between 375 and 400. For this project, you won't need much higher than that. However, it is nice to have a soldering iron that goes higher or lower than that for other projects. Take note of how much solder is used on there at the moment and use that as a goal of how much to put on there. Before removing any solder, as counterintuitive as it seems, add a little bit of fresh solder to the points. While using your soldering wick, make sure you have plenty of room as the heat transfers through and you do not want to burn yourself. Take the tip of your soldering iron and place it on top of the soldering wick, and place the wick on top of the solder that you are trying to remove. To remove the old solder, you have to heat it through the wick, which does take longer. So take your time. This is a slow process and you're going to have to do it 4 or 5 times at least to make sure you fully have removed all of the solder. Taking out the power jack can be very tricky, so take your time, be gentle, and make sure you don't damage the RF receiver that is located right next to the power jack. Once you've taken off the broken piece, you can now go in using alcohol and a toothbrush to clean off the area. I would also use this time to clean off other parts of the board that may need some cleaning. As I mentioned earlier, I've cleaned off most of this board. However, the bottom could use a touch-up, so I'm going to do that now. Now that you've cleaned up your workspace, it is time to slide in that new part. Again, putting this part in is very tricky. Take your time and be gentle. Once you've put the part in, screw it in with that one silver screw to hold it in place. Next step is to add some flux to the area that we are going to be soldering. So make sure you add enough flux around these two connectors as that is where we're going to be soldering. Putting on too much solder isn't a good idea for your machine as it can cause interference, so add your solder very slowly and very carefully. Now it's time to put the bottom half of the heat shield on and place it in with the correct screws. You can now take the bottom half of the plastic shell and place your motherboard back inside. You can now plug in the power button and leave it here. Slide your cartridge slot back in. This would be a good time to test your machine, as it is together enough to be able to plug into a TV, connect to the power, just to make sure that the machine is working properly. However, I wanted to make sure that the controller port wasn't damaged either, so I connected the power button, the controller port, and the connector pins back before I tested it, which is fine as well. Once you're satisfied, unplug the machine, cycle the power one more time. Now you can disconnect your controller port, reinstall the top half of the heat shield using the correct screws. You can now plug your control port back in permanently. Again, make sure you're using all the correct screws throughout this process. Put back the eject button, which I mentioned can be tricky, so take your time. Use the photo of the eject button that you took earlier to refer to how to put it back in properly. You can now place the top half of your shell back on, flip your machine over, and screw everything in place. Connect your machine to power source and a television and test it one last time. If the test went well, ladies and gentlemen, we are squared up. If there's any repairs that you would like to see on our page, let us know in the comment section below. What are you having problems with? What do you need help repairing? Let me know. You might just see one of those videos pop up in the next few weeks. Once again, put that in the comment section below. As always, my name is Sean. Thank you for watching. Hit like, hit subscribe, and until next time, you've been squared up.